I stood frozen in the super-fresh checkout line, my hand trapped in the cashier's desperate grip. "Your son isn't who you think he is," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the parking lot where my boy waited. 23 years old, barely more than a teenager herself. Why would this stranger risk her job to warn me? Through the window, I watched my successful lawyer's son drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. The cashier slipped me a folded receipt. "Back door, 5 minutes, please." My name is Leann, and at 68 years old, I thought I knew everything there was to know about my son James. Lord knows I'd sacrificed enough to raise him right after my husband Carl passed, when James was just 12. Heart attack at 45. No warning, no goodbye. Just me and my boy against the world. Those early years nearly broke me. I worked double shifts at the hospital cafeteria during the day and cleaned offices at night. My mother's pearl necklace, her diamond engagement ring, the silver tea set from my wedding, all sold to pay for James's education. We moved from our 4-bedroom colonial to a cramped apartment near the highway. The walls were so thin you could hear the trucks rumbling past at all hours, but James never complained. He'd sit at our rickety kitchen table doing homework by the light of a single lamp while I dozed between shifts. "We're going to make it, Mom," he'd say, his young face so serious. "I'm going to be a lawyer and buy you a big house." And he did it. My boy graduated summa cum laude from law school, landed a position at Denver's most prestigious firm, and married Sarah Harrison, daughter of medical clinic mogul Richard Harrison. Their wedding 5 years ago was something out of a magazine. 400 guests, ice sculptures, a string quartet. I wore a dress Sarah insisted on buying me from Nordstrom. It cost more than my monthly pension check. Now here I was visiting for their anniversary, standing in their marble-floored foyer that was bigger than my entire apartment. Sarah greeted me with her usual nervous smile, her hands fluttering to her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant with their first child, she glowed with that special light expectant mothers have, though something in her hazel eyes seemed dimmed. "Leann, you look wonderful," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. James appeared behind her, my handsome son in his $1,000 suit, cellular phone pressed to his ear. He held up a finger. Wait a minute. While barking instructions to someone about depositions and case precedents, Sarah's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. When he finally ended the call, James embraced me with the kind of perfunctory hug you'd give a distant relative. "Mother, good to see you. How was the drive?" 3 hours of construction, but I made it," I replied, studying his face. When had those laugh lines around his eyes become so hard? Over the years, certain things had nagged at me like a pebble in my shoe. Small things, really. James insisted on managing my finances after Carl's death benefits ran out. "You worked too hard for too long," he'd say. "Let me handle the complicated stuff." He'd set up my bills on autopay, manage my retirement account, even did my taxes. I was grateful, wasn't I? My son, the lawyer, taking care of his old mother. But there were rules, unspoken ones. I couldn't visit unless specifically invited. "Sarah needs her space," James would explain. "You know how hormonal pregnant women get." Phone calls were scheduled. Sundays at 2 o'clock, 15 minutes maximum. If I called outside that window, he rarely answered. At firm events, his colleagues would greet me politely but distantly, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. Once at a Christmas party, a junior partner's wife had started to tell me something about James, but her husband quickly steered her away. I'd puzzled over that interaction for months. Now in their pristine living room with its white furniture, no real family could maintain Sarah perched on the edge of a chair, like a bird ready to take flight. James sat beside her, his hand on her knee. To anyone watching it would look protective, but I noticed how her leg tensed under his touch, how she glanced at him before speaking. "I have such a craving for that chocolate fudge cake from Super Fresh," Sarah said softly. "The one with the raspberry filling. They only make them on Saturdays." James checked his watch. "I suppose we could stop by. I have a conference call with Hong Kong in an hour, though." "I'll go," I offered. "Just give me directions." "No, I'll drive you," James said firmly. Can't have you getting lost in a strange city. The 10-minute drive to Superfresh was silent except for the classical music James preferred. He pulled into the parking lot and stopped near the entrance engine running. "Aren't you coming in?" I asked. He waved his phone. "Hong Kong's calling early. You know where the bakery section is." I climbed out my arthritis, protesting as always. The automatic doors whooshed open, welcoming me into fluorescent brightness and piped-in oldies. I found the bakery, selected Sarah's cake, and headed for checkout. That's when it happened. The cashier, a young woman with auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, scanned my item without looking up. Then her green eyes widened. She glanced at my credit card at my face, then through the window where James waited. Mrs. Mitchell, her name tag read Amy. "Yes." She grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Your son isn't who you think he is." My heart stuttered. "Excuse me." Amy's gaze darted around nervously. A line was forming behind me. Her manager was heading our way. She pressed a receipt into my palm, her hand shaking. "Back door, 5 minutes, please. Sarah's life depends on it." The manager arrived. "Everything all right here, Amy?" "Yes, Mr. Bradford." Amy managed a bright smile. "Just helping Mrs. Mitchell find her rewards card." I fumbled through the transaction, my mind spinning. Sarah's life. This had to be some mistake, a case of mistaken identity. My James could never. But as I walked toward the exit cake box in hand, I caught sight of my son through the window. He wasn't on the phone. He was watching the store entrance with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating. The face of a stranger wearing my son's features. I made my decision. Instead of heading outside, I turned toward the restroom sign, then slipped through a door marked Employees Only. My heart hammered against my ribs as I navigated a narrow hallway lined with boxes following exit signs until I reached a loading dock. Amy was already there, pacing beside a dumpster. When she saw me, relief flooded her face. "Thank God you came. I wasn't sure you'd believe me." "I don't believe you," I said firmly, "but I'm listening." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "I'm Sarah's cousin. We grew up together in Colorado Springs. She's been trying to reach out to family for months, but he monitors everything. Her calls, her emails, even her doctor visits." "That's ridiculous. James loves Sarah." "Does he?" Amy thrust her phone at me. "Look at these texts. She sends them from a hidden phone she keeps in the bathroom air vent." I squinted at the screen, wishing I'd brought my reading glasses. The messages were fragmented, desperate. "He's getting worse. Can't leave the house without him. Found my passport cut up. Please help, but be careful. He's planning something terrible." "This could be anyone," I said, but my voice wavered. "Look at the contact photo." It was Sarah, but not the glowing bride from the wedding photos. This Sarah had hollow eyes and a brittle smile. When was the last time I'd really looked at my daughter-in-law, past the expensive clothes and perfect makeup? A door slammed somewhere inside the building. We both jumped. "My manager, Brad, is Sarah's childhood friend." Amy spoke quickly. "We've been trying to help for months. There's more Mrs. Mitchell, so much more. But your son will get suspicious if you're gone too long." "This is insane. You're telling me my son, who I raised alone, who got straight A's and law review and is an abuser." Amy's eyes filled with tears. "And worse. Please, meet us tonight. Brad hired someone to investigate. What they found, Mrs. Mitchell, other women have died." The blood drained from my face. "What?" 11 o'clock tonight. The Denny's on Colfax Avenue. Come alone. And Mrs. Mitchell." She gripped my shoulders. "Whatever you do, act normal. Your life might depend on it too." I stumbled back through the store in a daze, clutching the cake box like a life preserver. James was scrolling through his phone when I climbed into the car. "Took you long enough," he said without looking up. There was a line. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. He glanced at me, then those sharp eyes I'd once been so proud of now seeming predatory. "You all right, Mother? You look pale." "Just tired from the drive." "Maybe you should rest when we get back. Sarah's been emotional lately. Pregnancy hormones, you know. Sometimes she says things that aren't quite accurate." A chill ran down my spine. Was he warning me? As we pulled into their driveway, I noticed things I'd missed before. The security cameras at every angle, the way the windows had locks on the inside, the 8-foot privacy fence that seemed less about keeping people out and more about keeping someone in. "James," I said as he turned off the engine, "you know I love you, right?" He paused his hand on the door handle. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of something. The boy who used to fall asleep against my shoulder during those long bus rides to school. "Of course, Mother. And you know I'd do anything for you." "I know." His smile was perfect and empty. That's what I've always counted on. As we walked toward the house, Sarah's cake balanced in my unsteady hands, I wondered if I'd ever really known my son at all. The receipt Amy had given me burned in my pocket like a confession I wasn't ready to hear. But I would go to that Denny's. God help me, I would go. Because if even a fraction of what Amy said was true, then the boy I'd sacrificed everything for had become something monstrous. And the young woman waiting inside that beautiful prison of a house was counting on someone to see past the perfect facade. That someone would have to be me. The hours until 11 o'clock stretched like pulled taffy. I sat through dinner at their mahogany dining table, pushing salmon around my plate, while James dominated the conversation with stories from his law firm. Sarah barely touched her food, claiming morning sickness, even though it was evening. "The Pemberton case is going beautifully," James said, cutting his fish with surgical precision. "The opposing counsel doesn't realize we have their clients' offshore accounts documented. By the time we're done, Pemberton will own everything." "That seems harsh," I ventured. His fork paused midway to his mouth. "It's business, Mother. The weak get devoured by the strong. Natural selection." Sarah's water glass trembled as she set it down. After dinner, I excused myself, claiming exhaustion. In the guest room, decorated in shades of gray that felt oppressive, I lay fully dressed on the bed, watching the clock. At 10:30, I crept downstairs. James's study door was closed, a strip of light beneath it. I could hear him on another call, something about moving assets and liquidation timelines. My car keys were on the hall table where I'd left them. I slipped out through the garage, praying the security system wouldn't alert him to my exit. The Denny's on Colfax was exactly what you'd expect. Cracked vinyl booths, flickering neon, the smell of coffee that had been burning since the Carter administration. Amy sat in a corner booth with a broad-shouldered man in his 30s. His face was kind but worried. "Mrs. Mitchell," he stood as I approached. "I'm Brad Morrison. Thank you for coming." I slid into the booth, accepting the coffee Amy poured from a carafe. My hands shook as I lifted the cup. "Show me what you have," I said. "All of it." Brad opened a manila folder. The first photo made me gasp. Sarah's upper arms mottled with purple fingerprints. The next showed bruises along her ribs, her collarbone, the base of her throat. "These were taken 2 months ago," Amy explained. She told the emergency room she fell down the stairs. "James would never—" "There's more." Brad spread bank statements across the table. Highlighted transfers showed money flowing from accounts bearing Sarah's name to ones I didn't recognize. He's been systematically draining her trust fund. $3 million so far. But he makes good money at the firm. Does he? Brad pulled out another document. "I have a friend who works at Hartley & Associates. James is on probation for ethical violations, 2 complaints of forging client signatures. He's hanging by a thread." The room tilted. I gripped the table edge. "Mrs. Mitchell." Brad's voice gentled. "I hired a private investigator, someone who specializes in financial fraud. What they found goes back years." He showed me a photograph of a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes, pretty in that wholesome way that speaks of Sunday dinners and charity work. Margaret Chen, James's fiancée in law school? He never mentioned. She died 6 months before graduation, hiking accident in Rocky Mountain National Park. Fell off a cliff during a sunrise hike. James was the only witness. My stomach churned. Accidents happen. 2 weeks before she died, she changed her life insurance beneficiary to James. $500,000. The investigator pulled the original police report. The detective had questions. Why were they hiking in dress shoes? Why did James wait 3 hours to call for help? But Margaret's parents were immigrants, didn't speak perfect English. They were too grief-stricken to push for answers. I stared at the young woman's face. She looked so happy, so trusting. Amy reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. There's something else. About Sarah's father. Brad produced medical records. Richard Harrison has been experiencing mysterious symptoms for 6 months. Fatigue, confusion, minor organ dysfunction. His doctors are baffled. But look at the timeline. It started right after James began handling some of Harrison's legal affairs. You're suggesting my son is poisoning his father-in-law. The symptoms are consistent with chronic arsenic exposure, Brad said quietly. Small doses over time, not enough to kill quickly, just enough to incapacitate, to make him vulnerable to signing over power of attorney. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. This couldn't be real. This was my James who used to leave notes in my lunch bag when I worked doubles, who cried when our cat died, who promised to take care of me forever. I need air. I stumbled out of the booth and through the door into the parking lot. The October night was crisp, carrying the scent of distant snow. I leaned against my car, gulping oxygen. Amy followed. I know this is overwhelming. Overwhelming. I whirled on her. You're telling me my son is a murderer, a monster, that I raised a... The words choked me. You raised a son who learned to mimic emotions without feeling them, Amy said gently. It's not your fault, Mrs. Mitchell. Some people are just born broken. Brad emerged with the folder. There's more evidence, phone recordings, emails, but we need your help. To do what? To save Sarah and her baby. His jaw tightened. The investigator found something else. James has been researching medical complications during childbirth, specifically conditions that could cause maternal death. The ground beneath my feet seemed to shift. No, he wouldn't. His own child. He's taken out a $2 million life insurance policy on Sarah, double indemnity for accidental death or death during childbirth. Brad's eyes were hard. She's due in 6 weeks. I thought of Sarah's nervous hands, her hollow eyes, the way she flinched when James touched her. My God, how had I been so blind? What do you need me to do? Go back, act normal, but document everything. Take pictures, record conversations if you can. Amy pressed a small device into my hand. This is a voice recorder. It looks like a pen. Keep it in your pocket. We're building a case, Brad added, but we need more evidence, enough that the police can't ignore it like they did with Margaret. I thought of that young woman falling through mountain air reaching for help that wouldn't come, of Sarah trapped in that beautiful house with my son, of a baby who might never know its mother. I'll do it. My voice steadied, but I need you to understand something. The moment we have enough evidence, the second Sarah and her baby are safe, I'm done with him. He's no son of mine. Brad squeezed my shoulder. You're brave, Mrs. Mitchell. No, I said, pocketing the recorder. I'm just a mother who's finally opening her eyes. The drive back to James's house was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Every shadow could be him following me. Every set of headlights made my heart race. But when I slipped back into the garage, the house was dark except for the study light. I made it to my room without incident, but as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They paused outside my door. The knob turned slowly, testing. I'd locked it. Mother, James's voice was soft. Are you awake? I forced my breathing to remain deep and even. After an eternity, the footsteps moved away. But I knew he knew. Somewhere in that analytical mind, he was already calculating, planning, adjusting his strategy. The game had begun, and I was playing for lives. Sarah's, the baby's, maybe even my own. I clutched the pen recorder and made a promise to Margaret Chen's ghost and Sarah's unborn child I would stop him. Even if it destroyed what was left of my heart. Even if it meant admitting that the son I loved had never really existed at all. The next morning, I emerged from the guest room with my game face firmly in place. 23 years of school board meetings had taught me how to smile when I wanted to scream, and I called on every ounce of that experience now. "Good morning, sweetheart," I chirped at James, who sat at the breakfast bar reviewing documents. "Sleep well." He looked up, studying me with those calculating eyes. "Like the dead. You were restless last night. I heard you moving around." "Old bladder." I laughed, pouring coffee with hands I willed not to shake. "The curse of aging. Where's Sarah?" "Lying down, morning sickness." He returned to his papers, but I felt him tracking my movements. I spent the morning playing the doting mother-in-law, helping Sarah organize the nursery. She moved like someone walking through a minefield, each gesture careful and contained. When James left for the office, her shoulders sagged with visible relief. "He's working late tonight," she said softly, folding tiny onesies with mechanical precision. "Partnership review coming up." This was my chance. "Sarah, honey, would you like some tea? You look exhausted." In the kitchen, I brewed chamomile and studied my daughter-in-law. Without James present, the mask slipped. Dark circles shadowed her eyes despite expensive concealer. Her hands trembled as she accepted the cup. "Sarah," I said carefully, "you know you can talk to me about anything, right?" Her eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "Of course, Leann. Everything's fine." I wanted to tell her about Amy, about the evidence, about the plan. But Brad had warned me. James might have the house bugged. Instead, I patted her hand and changed the subject to baby names. That evening, while James attended his late meeting, I put the pen recorder to use. His home office was locked, but I'd learned a thing or two raising a teenager. The trick with interior door locks is a bobby pin and patience. His desk was meticulous files labeled with military precision. I photographed everything: client documents, bank statements, correspondence. In the bottom drawer, wrapped in plastic, I found medical reports for Richard Harrison. Margin notes in James's handwriting detailed dosages and expected deterioration rates. My son was methodically calculating how to kill his father-in-law. Behind the reports, I discovered a leather journal. The entries were dated clinical, like a scientist documenting an experiment. Subject S, increasingly compliant. Reduced caloric intake, making her weaker. RH showing expected symptoms. Increased dose next week. Mother visiting. Potential disruption to timeline. Monitor closely. Mother. That was me. A potential disruption. I photographed each page, my stomach revolting at the casual cruelty. This wasn't my son's handwriting. It was a stranger's, someone who viewed people as chess pieces to be moved and sacrificed. A car door slammed outside. James was home early. I shoved everything back, relocked the door, and made it to the living room just as he entered. I was casually flipping through a magazine, the pen recorder hidden in my pocket. "Working late?" I asked pleasantly. Meeting ended early. He studied the room like a detective at a crime scene. "What have you been up to?" "Reading, watching some television. Sarah went to bed with a headache." "Did she—" He moved toward the stairs. "I should check on her." "Let her sleep," I said quickly. "She needs rest." He paused, that predator's smile playing at his lips. "Concerned about my wife, Mother. How thoughtful." Over the next 3 days, I became a spy in my son's house. The pen recorder captured his phone calls about offshore accounts and shell companies. I photographed forged documents bearing Sarah's signature. I found the hidden safe behind a painting in his closet. The combination was his law school graduation date, the day he'd promised to make me proud. Inside were insurance policies, not just on Sarah, but on Richard Harrison, on me, each with James as beneficiary, each for millions. My own son had calculated my worth in death. But the worst discovery came when I was helping Sarah with laundry. Tucked inside a maternity dress pocket, I found a small cloth bag. Inside were pills Sarah was secretly collecting, the prenatal vitamins James gave her each morning. She'd been pretending to take them, then hiding them. Smart girl. Smarter than her mother-in-law, who'd blindly taken whatever vitamins James provided for her aging bones. That night at dinner, I watched James prepare Sarah's plate, adding supplements to her food with practiced ease. When he turned to get water, I switched our plates. "Mother, that's Sarah's. he said sharply when he returned. "Oh, I'm sorry, we're having the same thing, aren't we?" I took a large bite before he could stop me. Delicious. His jaw tightened, but he couldn't insist without seeming strange. Within an hour, I felt dizzy, nauseous. Whatever he was giving her was powerful. I excused myself and made myself vomit in the guest bathroom, flushing away the evidence. On the fourth night, everything accelerated. I overheard James on a call scheduling something for the weekend. "Yes, Dr. Morrison, my wife's been having concerning symptoms. Paranoia aggression toward me. I'm worried about the baby. A psychiatric hold might be necessary. Yes, I have documentation of her instability." Dr. Morrison. Not Brad Morrison. This was someone else. Someone James was paying to commit Sarah involuntarily. I crept back to my room and texted Amy from the burner phone Brad had given me. "He's moving this weekend, planning to have S committed." The response was immediate. "Get her out tonight." But when I went to find Sarah, James was already there sitting on their bed holding her hand. She looked terrified, but tried to hide it. "Telling my wife about your concern for her health," James said smoothly. "How you've noticed mood swings, erratic behavior. Haven't you, Mother?" The threat was clear. Side with him or be labeled unstable yourself. "Sarah seems fine to me," I said firmly. His grip on her hand tightened. Sarah winced but didn't pull away. "That's not what you told me yesterday," he said, "about finding her crying in the nursery, talking to herself." "I never said that." "Didn't you?" He produced his phone, played a recording. My voice, but saying words I'd never spoken. "James, I'm worried about Sarah. She's been acting strange, paranoid. I think she might hurt herself or the baby." Technology, of course. He'd spliced together conversations, created evidence that didn't exist. I didn't. "Mother, I think you're confused. Maybe you should rest." His smile was razor sharp. "We wouldn't want you to have an episode." I understood then. We were all trapped in his web. Sarah, her father, me. But spiders sometimes forgot that their prey could bite back. That night, I waited until the house was silent. Then I crept to Sarah's room. James was at his computer in the study, headphones on, reviewing documents. I slipped inside and shook her gently. "We're leaving," I whispered. "Now." She sat up, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "He'll find us." "Not where we're going." I helped her pack a small bag. "There's a women's shelter outside the city. Amy arranged it." We made it to the hallway before James appeared at the top of the stairs, backlit like an avenging angel. "Going somewhere?" Sarah froze, but I stepped forward. "We're leaving James. It's over." "Is it?" He descended slowly, each step measured. "Mother, you're confused. Sarah, darling, you know what happens if you try to leave. Your father's medication is so precisely balanced. One missed dose." "You're poisoning him," I said flatly. "Treating him. Without my careful management, he'd be dead in a week." He reached the bottom step. "Acute arsenic poisoning is agonizing, I'm told. Convulsions, organ failure, bleeding from every orifice." Sarah made a broken sound. "But if you both return to your rooms like good girls," James continued, "Father Harrison continues his treatments. Everyone stays healthy." This was my son. This calculating monster who held lives hostage with poison and smiled while doing it. "James," I said quietly, "what happened to you?" For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that terrible emptiness. "I became what I needed to be," he said. "Now choose, Mother. Save the old man or save yourselves. You have 10 seconds. Sarah looked at me, tears streaming. We both knew there was no choice. We returned to our rooms. But as I lay in bed clutching the pen recorder that had captured every word, I knew something James didn't. Amy had heard everything through the phone hidden in my pocket. Help was coming. The hunter thought he'd won. He didn't realize he'd already been caught in a larger web spun by the women he'd underestimated. His 10 seconds were running out. The next morning, James's scrutiny intensified. He worked from home, positioning himself where he could monitor both Sarah and me. His laptop stayed open, multiple screens showing security camera feeds from around the house. We were prisoners in a digital panopticon. "I've arranged for us all to have lunch with Dr. Morrison," he announced over breakfast. "A family consultation about Sarah's pregnancy care." Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. This Dr. Morrison wasn't her obstetrician. This was the psychiatrist James planned to use for the involuntary commitment. "That's thoughtful," I managed, though bile rose in my throat. "What time?" 2:00. His smile was predatory. "Mother, you'll share your observations about Sarah's behavior, for the baby's sake." After breakfast, I retreated to the bathroom, running water to cover my whispered conversation with Amy through the burner phone. "He's accelerating everything, this psychiatrist appointment. It's happening today." "We know. Brad's investigator uncovered something huge. Can you get to a computer?" "He's watching everything." "Check your email, urgent." I had to wait until James took a call in his office. Sarah and I sat in the living room pretending to look at baby catalogs while I discreetly checked my phone. The email from Brad contained a bombshell. James Patterson Mitchell wasn't my son's original name. He was born James Patterson Jr., son of Marcus Patterson, a man who'd run sophisticated insurance fraud schemes across 3 states before dying in federal prison. The boy I'd raised had hidden his true parentage, legally changing his name when he turned 18. But that wasn't the worst part. Marcus Patterson had another son, another James who died at age 3 under suspicious circumstances. Life insurance payout to the father, $200,000. My son had been named after a brother who'd been murdered for money. The investigator had tracked down Marcus Patterson's former cellmate, who'd shared stories Marcus told about teaching his surviving son the family business during prison visits: how to charm, how to choose victims, how to create documentation, how to kill without leaving evidence. "Start with someone who trusts you," Marcus had allegedly said. "Love makes people blind." I thought of Carl, my husband, dying so suddenly at 45. The doctors said heart attack, but now I wondered. James had been 12, old enough to follow instructions, old enough to put something in his father's coffee. The room spun. I gripped the couch arm, fighting nausea that had nothing to do with poisoned vitamins. "Leann." Sarah's worried voice seemed distant. "Are you all right?" James appeared, immediately studying my pale face. "Mother seems unwell. Perhaps she should rest before our appointment." "I'm fine," I lied, standing on unsteady legs. "Just need some water." In the kitchen, I gripped the counter and forced myself to breathe. How many deaths Carl Margaret Chen, almost Richard Harrison? How many others I didn't know about? And I'd loved him. God help me, I'd loved this creature who wore my son's face but carried his father's poisoned legacy. The phone in my pocket buzzed. A text from Brad: "Get out now, judge signed warrant, FBI mobilizing, 30 minutes. But James stood in the doorway watching me with those empty eyes. "Feeling better, Mother?" "Yes." I straightened, drawing on reserves I didn't know I had. "Much better." "Good. Dr. Morrison moved our appointment up. We leave in 5 minutes." This was it. He was going to have both Sarah and me committed probably claim we were having some kind of shared delusion. With his legal knowledge and forged recordings, who would believe us over a successful attorney? Sarah appeared coat clutched in her white-knuckled hands. Her eyes met mine, desperate and afraid. "Actually," I said, "I need to use the restroom first. Old bladder, you know." James checked his watch, irritated. 2 minutes. In the bathroom, I sent one last text: "Leaving for psych appointment. Black BMW license, JTM 482. Track us." When I emerged, James had Sarah by the elbow, guiding her toward the garage. I followed the pen recorder running in my pocket. Every word might matter now. In the car, James drove with one hand, the other resting on Sarah's knee. She stared straight ahead, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "This is for the best," he said conversationally. "Sarah, darling, you've been under such stress. A few days of rest, some medication to balance your hormones, and you'll be right as rain." I don't need medication, Sarah whispered. That's the illness talking. He squeezed her knee harder. Don't worry, Dr. Morrison specializes in prenatal psychosis. Very common, very treatable. Prenatal psychosis. He'd researched this, planned it, probably had false medical records prepared. Once Sarah was committed, he'd have full control. Power of attorney access to all her family's assets. And if she died in treatment, well, mental hospitals could be dangerous places. James. I said from the back seat, this isn't right. Sarah's not sick. His eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. You're confused again, Mother. Remember our conversation about your episodes? Dr. Morrison can evaluate you, too. A twofer, as they say. The threat was clear. Submit or be submitted. But as we stopped at a red light, I saw something that made my heart leap. A black SUV 2 cars back. Another in the parallel lane. They were being subtle, but I recognized the formation from every cop show I'd ever watched. The FBI was following us. James must have sensed something because he suddenly changed lanes, turning away from the medical complex. Wrong turn, I asked innocently. Taking a detour. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Construction ahead. But there was no construction. He was testing, checking for tails. The SUVs followed at a distance, trying not to be obvious. James's phone rang, Dr. Morrison's office, wondering where we were. He ignored it, taking another sudden turn. James, Sarah said, where are we going? Somewhere safe. His voice had changed, the smooth lawyer facade cracking. Somewhere we can talk without interruption. He pulled into an abandoned warehouse district, the kind of place where screams wouldn't be heard. My blood chilled. This wasn't part of his plan. He was improvising, and that made him dangerous. Get out, he ordered, parking between 2 derelict buildings. James, sweetheart. I tried, let's go home, we can talk there. Get out! The mask finally slipped, completely revealing the monster beneath. We climbed out, Sarah clutching her belly protectively. James grabbed her arm, dragging her toward a rusted door. I followed, praying the FBI hadn't lost us. Inside the warehouse was a cavern of shadows and broken windows. Pigeons cooed overhead, disturbed by our presence. Did you think I was stupid? James snarled, pushing Sarah against a concrete pillar. FBI surveillance, really, Mother. I don't know what you're talking about. He backhanded me casually, sending me sprawling. The taste of copper filled my mouth. Don't lie to me. He pulled something from his pocket, a syringe. I should have handled you both weeks ago. But no, I had to be careful, had to be perfect. Just like Marcus always said. Marcus, I spat blood. Your father... He froze. How do you... I know everything, James. Or should I call you Junior? Just like the brother your father killed for insurance money. His face contorted with rage. Don't you dare speak their names. You know nothing about family legacy. I know you killed Carl. The words ripped from my throat. Your own father. The man who loved you, who played catch with you, who was weak. James advanced on me, syringe raised. Marcus showed me strength, taught me to take what I deserved. You were 12 years old. Old enough to understand power. He grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. Old enough to put digitalis in his coffee and watch him clutch his chest. You were so grateful when I called 911. Remember your brave boy trying to save Daddy. I sobbed, the truth shattering the last illusions I'd held. There had never been a good son corrupted by circumstance. There had only been Marcus Patterson's boy wearing a careful mask of humanity. Sarah made a sound behind us, not fear, but fury. We'd both underestimated her. She stood tall despite her pregnancy cell phone in hand. It's over, James. I've been recording everything, streaming it live to the FBI server. Your confession, the assault, all of it. James spun toward her, but the warehouse doors burst open. Federal agents poured in weapons, drawn shouting commands. FBI dropped the weapon hands where we can see them. James looked at the syringe in his hand, then at me. For one terrible moment, I thought he'd lunge. Instead, he laughed, a broken sound like glass grinding. You clever bitches, he said almost admiringly. Playing the victims while setting your trap. Drop it now. The lead agent's voice brooked no argument. James let the syringe fall, raising his hands with mock surrender. I want my lawyer. You have the right to remain silent. The agent began moving forward with cuffs. But James wasn't done. Even defeated, he had to twist the knife one more time. Mother, he called as they cuffed him. Thank you for everything. The sacrifice, the double shifts, selling Grandma's jewelry. It funded my education perfectly. Marcus always said the best marks are the ones who love you. Each word was calculated to wound, to destroy whatever memories I had left. And it worked. I crumpled to the dirty concrete, watching them lead away, the stranger who'd called me mother for 35 years. Sarah knelt beside me, her arms warm and real around my shoulders. It's over, Leann. We're safe. But she was wrong. The danger was over. But the reckoning had just begun. I had 35 years of memories to re-examine, signs to acknowledge, guilt to process. My son was gone. He'd never existed. In his place stood Marcus Patterson's creation, finally exposed to the light. The aftermath of James's arrest was a whirlwind of FBI interviews, evidence documentation, and media frenzy. They moved Sarah and me to a safe house while they processed the scene and built their case. But 3 days later, something unexpected happened. James made bail. $2 million. I stared at Detective Patricia Stone, the cold case investigator who'd joined the federal team. Who would pay that for him? Her weathered face was grim. Your son has connections you don't know about, Mrs. Mitchell. Shell companies offshore, accounts a network of people who profit from his schemes. His lawyer argued the warehouse confession was coerced, that you and Sarah conspired to frame him. That's insane. That's Gregory Aldrich. She showed me a photo of a shark in a $3,000 suit. Best defense attorney money can buy. He's gotten murderers acquitted with less to work with. Sarah sat beside me, her face pale but determined. So James is free. House arrest with an ankle monitor. He can't come within 500 feet of either of you. Detective Stone leaned forward. But we need more evidence. The warehouse recording helps, but Aldrich will tear it apart in court. We need documentation, financial records, something incontrovertible. The baby shower, Sarah said suddenly. It's in 4 days. James planned it months ago before any of this. Sent invitations to everyone important in Denver society. Cancel it, I said immediately. No. Sarah's eyes blazed with newfound strength. He's been destroying women for years, hiding behind his reputation. Let's use that reputation against him. Detective Stone looked intrigued. What are you thinking? James is a narcissist. Even with an ankle monitor, he'll want to control the narrative. He'll send representatives try to spin the story. Sarah smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. What if we give him a platform? Let him think he's winning while we gather everyone who needs to hear the truth. Over the next 3 days, we planned with military precision. The country club venue remained booked. Invitations stood. But behind the scenes, our team worked overtime. Brad's investigator had uncovered 6 more women over the past 15 years. Not all deaths. Some were bankruptcies blamed on female hysteria. Others were women who'd fled the state after James destroyed their reputations. 2 agreed to attend the shower. Amy coordinated with the country club's AV team. Her manager, Brad, who conveniently had an IT background, would handle the technical aspects. Detective Stone worked with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, tracing James's offshore accounts. They found $17 million stolen from various victims over the years. Richard Harrison, recovering in the hospital under proper medical care, provided detailed testimony about his poisoning. His doctors confirmed arsenic in preserved hair and nail samples, going back months. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Morrison, not the psychiatrist James had hired but Sarah's actual obstetrician, had been keeping detailed records of her injuries. She'd photographed every bruise documented, every suspicious explanation, built a medical case file that would be devastating in court. I took an oath to do no harm. Dr. Morrison explained when we met. I couldn't force Sarah to leave, but I could document everything for when she was ready. The morning of the baby shower, I stood in the country club's grand ballroom watching staff arrange flowers and pink balloons. Such an innocent scene for what was coming. "You don't have to do this," Detective Stone said beside me, "testifying against your own son." "He's not my son." The words came easier now. My son died when Carl did. Maybe he never existed at all. Sarah arrived with Amy, both women radiating nervous energy. Sarah wore a flowing maternity dress that didn't quite hide the body armor underneath, Detective Stone's insistence. "Is everything ready?" Sarah asked Brad, who was adjusting cameras around the room. "Every angle covered. Live feed to the FBI server plus local recording." He checked his tablet. "Your husband's lawyer has already sent 3 cease and desist letters about the shower." "Let him," Sarah said. "After today, James won't have to worry about parties anymore." Guests began arriving at 2 o'clock. Denver's elite judges, doctors, business owners, the people whose opinions James valued above all else. They came expecting scandal gossip, perhaps a scene. They had no idea. I stood at the entrance greeting each arrival with the grace my position as a former principal had taught me. Yes, there had been some trouble. No, I wasn't sure of the details. So glad they could come support Sarah during this difficult time. Margaret Chen's parents arrived invited at the last minute by Detective Stone. They sat quietly in the back, their dignity a sharp contrast to the chattering socialites. At 2:30, Gregory Aldrich entered, like he owned the place. James couldn't attend due to his ankle monitor, he explained loudly, but sent his regards and this generous gift, a $10,000 nursery set. "How thoughtful," I said, my smile razor sharp. "Please, Mr. Aldrich, sit anywhere you like. The program will begin soon." He chose a prominent table, pulling out his phone to live stream. Perfect. Let James watch from house arrest. Let him see his empire crumble. Sarah took the microphone every inch, the gracious hostess. "Thank you all for coming. I know there have been questions about recent events. Today I'd like to provide some answers." The screens around the room flickered to life, not with baby photos or ultrasound images, but with evidence. Bank statements, forged signatures, medical reports. The room gasped collectively. "My husband," Sarah continued, her voice steady, "has stolen approximately $3 million from my family. The evidence is here, documented by federal investigators." Aldrich jumped up. "This is slander, I demand." "Sit down, Mr. Aldrich." Detective Stone, commanded badge visible. "You'll want to see the rest." The screens changed. Photos of bruises, medical documentation, a timeline of abuse stretching back 2 years. "He was careful," Sarah said. "Never where it would show in court. Always with plausible explanations. But Dr. Morrison kept records." Dr. Morrison stood nodding confirmation. Several guests who knew her reputation as Denver's most respected obstetrician murmured in shock. Then came the financial crimes. Brad took over his presentation, corporate crisp, walking through shell companies, and money laundering with charts and graphs. The business owners in the audience followed along their expressions, darkening as they recognized the sophisticated theft. "But that's just money," I said, taking the microphone from Sarah. My voice carried the authority of decades in education. "Let me tell you about Margaret Chen." Her parents straightened in their seats. I told Margaret's story, the brilliant law student who fell in love with the wrong man, the life insurance policy, the suspicious death, the investigation that went nowhere because a grieving immigrant family didn't know how to push back against a smooth-talking law student. "This is outrageous." Aldrich was on his feet again. "Mrs. Mitchell, your son will sue you for every penny." "My son," I said clearly, "is a murderer." The warehouse confession played on the screens. James's voice admitting to killing Carl, describing it with pride. The room sat in stunned silence, hearing the monster reveal himself. But we weren't done. Amy introduced 2 women who'd flown in that morning. Laura Hensley, whose tech startup mysteriously failed after she ended her engagement to James in 2014. She'd lost everything, been committed for depression, rebuilt her life in Seattle. Monica Valdez, who dated James briefly in 2017. She'd woken up in a hotel room with no memory of how she got there. Her credit cards maxed out intimate photos of her posted online from James's anonymous accounts. She'd fled to Texas to escape the shame. Each woman told her story with quiet dignity. The patterns were clear: charm, control, destruction. 6 women that we know of, Detective Stone announced. Over $17 million stolen, 2 suspicious deaths, 1 attempted murder by poisoning. She nodded to the screens which showed Richard Harrison's medical reports, the arsenic levels highlighted. Several guests pulled out phones not to gossip but to call their lawyers, their connections, their own investigators. James had done business with many of them. How deep did this go? Aldrich had gone pale, frantically texting, no doubt telling James to flee. Too bad about that ankle monitor. "There's more," Sarah said, retaking the microphone. "I'm filing for divorce, obviously, but I wanted you all to witness something." She pulled out a document. "This is a new will. Everything I have goes to 3 places: my child, a foundation for domestic abuse survivors, and the woman who saved my life by sacrificing her own peace." Sarah looked at me, tears streaming. "Leann, you lost your son to save me and my baby. I can't repay that, but I can make sure you're never vulnerable again." I broke down, then surrounded by Denver's elite, crying for the son who'd never existed and the daughter I'd gained through horror. "One more thing," Detective Stone announced. "Mr. Aldrich, you might want to tell your client that fleeing isn't an option. We've frozen his accounts, invalidated his passport, and have agents stationed outside his home. The ankle monitor was just courtesy." Aldrich grabbed his briefcase and fled, presumably to advise James that the game was over. The room erupted in chaos. Conversations, phone calls, expressions of shock and support. Margaret Chen's mother approached me, taking my hands in her weathered ones. "Thank you," she whispered in accented English. "Thank you for giving my daughter justice." As the crowd swirled around us, Sarah and I stood together, 2 women bound by survival. The trap had been sprung perfectly publicly, with the entire city's power structure as witnesses. James had valued his reputation above all else. Now that reputation was destroyed, his crimes exposed to the people whose opinions he'd killed to cultivate. But we weren't quite done. One more card remained to be played, and Sarah held it in reserve like the queen she'd learned to be. "By the way," she announced as people began to leave, "I've been working with the FBI for months, not just recording James, but documenting everyone who enabled him. The investigation is just beginning." Several prominent lawyers and businessmen who'd been edging toward the exits froze. Denver's elite would be cleaning house for years. And somewhere watching on his lawyer's live stream, James Patterson Jr. was learning what it felt like to be hunted by someone smarter than himself. The prey had become predators. And we were just getting started. The baby shower aftermath sent shockwaves through Denver society, but James didn't go quietly. Over the next week, he mounted a vicious counterattack through social media, leaked stories to sympathetic journalists and his lawyers' press conferences. He painted himself as a successful attorney brought down by jealous women and a mother suffering from dementia. Some people believed him. They always do when a handsome, articulate man claims victimhood. But we were ready for that too. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out, speedy by federal standards. James remained on house arrest, his ankle monitor a constant reminder that his freedom was an illusion. But even caged, he was dangerous. Sarah went into labor 3 weeks early. I was with her when the contractions started, staying in the Harrison Estates guest house while Richard recovered. Her water broke at 3 in the morning, and something was wrong. The fluid was tinged with green. Meconium. Dr. Morrison said when we reached the hospital, "The baby's in distress. We need to do an emergency C-section." As they wheeled Sarah into surgery, she gripped my hand. "If something happens to me, nothing will happen." But my heart hammered with fear. What if James had found a way? What if, despite all our precautions, He'd managed one last poisoning. "Promise me," Sarah insisted. "You'll raise her, not my parents, not anyone else. You." "I promise." The next hour was the longest of my life. I paced the waiting room, praying to a God I'd neglected since Carl's death, bargaining, begging, offering anything for Sarah and the baby to survive. When Dr. Morrison finally emerged, her smile told me everything. Mother and daughter are perfect. There was some stress, but we caught it in time. "Can I see them?" "In a few minutes. Sarah's asking for you." I found my daughter-in-law, for that's how I thought of her now, holding a tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair. The baby's eyes were alert, taking in the world with what seemed like ancient wisdom. "Meet Margaret Hope," Sarah whispered, Maggie for short. I sobbed at the name, understanding the tribute to James's first victim and the promise of something better. "She's beautiful," I managed. "She's ours," Sarah corrected. "You and me, Leann, we're her family." 3 days later, we brought Maggie home under FBI escort. The threats had started immediately after her birth. Anonymous letters, phone calls, messages from James's remaining supporters. But something had shifted in the public narrative, too. The other women we'd found, Laura, Monica, and 3 others who came forward after the shower, had started a social media campaign. Believe the victims' trends alongside photos of their evidence, their stories, their survival. Margaret Chen's parents gave an interview to a major news network, their quiet dignity and obvious grief, making James's claims of conspiracy look exactly as hollow as they were. But the real turning point came from an unexpected source. Marcus Patterson Jr.'s former cellmate Tommy Caldwell reached out from federal prison. He'd seen the news coverage and had something to say. Marcus used to brag about his boy. Tommy told the FBI investigators in a recorded interview, said he was raising him to be the perfect predator, taught him on visiting days how to fake emotions, how to pick victims, how to kill without getting caught. That kid was Marcus's masterpiece. The interview went viral within hours. James's carefully crafted image couldn't survive the revelation that he'd been trained from childhood to be a killer. More victims emerged, women who'd been too afraid or ashamed to speak before. The FBI set up a dedicated hotline and received over 200 calls in the first week. Not all were legitimate. Fame seekers and attention cravings always emerged during high-profile cases. But 17 were real, verified, documented. 17 women whose lives James had destroyed in various ways. The prosecution amended their charges. What had started as murder fraud and attempted murder became a federal racketeering case. James hadn't acted alone. He'd built a network of enablers, corrupt doctors, complicit lawyers, business partners who'd looked the other way. The trial began on a cold February morning. I sat in the gallery between Sarah and Amy Maggie, sleeping in a carrier beside us. Across the aisle, Margaret Chen's parents maintained their dignified vigil. Behind them, rows of women, James's survivors, each wearing a small purple ribbon. James entered in an expensive suit, his shackles removed for court appearances. He looked thinner but still handsome, still carrying that charm that had fooled so many. His eyes found mine across the courtroom, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the boy who'd once brought me dandelions picked from the playground. Then his lips curved in that predator's smile and the illusion shattered. The prosecution's case was methodical, devastating. Financial records, medical evidence, recorded confessions. They played the warehouse tape, James's voice filling the courtroom as he bragged about killing Carl. I testified on the 3rd day. Gregory Aldrich tried to destroy me, bringing up my age, suggesting memory problems implying I'd been manipulated by Sarah. But I'd spent 23 years facing down school board bullies. One slick lawyer didn't scare me. "Mrs. Mitchell," Aldrich said smoothly, "isn't it true you're financially dependent on Sarah Harrison now?" "I am living in her guest house, yes." "And she's promised you significant money in her will." "She has." "So you have every incentive to support her version of events." I leaned forward, meeting his eyes steadily. "Mr. Aldrich, I raised James Patterson Jr. alone after my husband's death. I worked double shifts, sold everything I owned, sacrificed my health and happiness to give him opportunities. I loved him more than my own life. Do you really think money could buy that kind of betrayal I'm testifying? Because it's the truth. Because other women deserve justice. And because the son I thought I raised never existed. There was only Marcus Patterson's creature wearing a mask I was too loving to see through. The courtroom was silent. Even Aldrich seemed momentarily stunned. Sarah testified the next day, Maggie in her arms. She detailed the abuse with clinical precision, showed her scars, presented her evidence. When Aldrich suggested she'd fabricated everything for money, she laughed. I have money, Mr. Aldrich. What I wanted was love. What I got was a monster who saw me as a bank account with a pulse. The parade of victims continued for a week. Each woman told her story, presented her evidence, showed how James had systematically destroyed their lives. The cumulative effect was devastating. But the moment that sealed James's fate came from Detective Stone. She'd continued investigating during trial preparation and found something extraordinary. Your Honor, she announced, we've discovered evidence of another victim, the defendant's first. She presented school records from when James was 9. A classmate named Timothy Morse had died in a playground accident, fell from the jungle gym and broke his neck. James was the only witness. We exhumed Timothy's body, Detective Stone continued. The forensic evidence suggests he was pushed. The courtroom erupted. Even Aldrich looked shocked. Furthermore, Detective Stone raised her voice over the chaos. We found Timothy's diary in his family's attic. He wrote about James demanding his lunch money, threatening him. The day he died, Timothy wrote that he was going to tell the teacher. 9 years old, James had been killing since he was 9. I ran from the courtroom and vomited in the hallway bathroom, Sarah holding my hair back, while Maggie fussed in her carrier. My son had been a murderer before he lost his baby teeth. Every moment of his childhood that I'd cherished was tainted with blood I hadn't seen. When we returned, James was on the stand. Aldrich had made the desperate decision to let him testify, probably hoping his charm could sway the jury. It was a massacre. The prosecutor walked James through his crimes with surgical precision. For the first time, cornered and exposed, James's mask didn't just slip. It shattered completely. They were weak, he snarled when asked about his victims. Margaret was going to leave me after everything I'd invested in her. Timothy was a sniveling brat. Carl was holding us back with his pathetic salary. They deserved what they got. And your mother, the prosecutor asked quietly, did she deserve to believe she'd raised a good son? James looked at me then, and his smile was pure malice. My mother was the easiest mark of all. So desperate for love, she'd believe anything. Marcus taught me to start with family. They're the blindest. Those words freed something in me. The last chains of maternal love snapped, leaving only clean, righteous anger. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Life without parole, consecutive sentences, ensuring he'd die in prison, even if one conviction was overturned on appeal. As they led James away, he didn't look at me. His eyes were on Sarah and Maggie, promising vengeance, even in defeat. But Sarah stood tall, our daughter safe in her arms, surrounded by FBI agents and the sisterhood of survivors. Outside the courthouse, the media waited in a feeding frenzy, but it was Margaret Chen's mother who spoke for all of us. Today, justice was served, she said in careful English. Not just for my Margaret, but for all the women whose voices were silenced. Thank you to the investigators who believed us. Thank you to Sarah Harrison for her courage. And thank you to Leann Mitchell, who sacrificed her son to save others. This is what love looks like. Not blind, but brave. That night I sat in Sarah's nursery rocking Maggie while Sarah slept. The baby gazed up at me with eyes that held no trace of her father's emptiness. Just curiosity, wonder the pure potential of a life untainted by Marcus Patterson's poison. I'll tell you about your daddy someday, I whispered. Not the monster he became, but the boy I thought he was. The one who brought me dandelions and promised to buy me a house. That boy was real to me, even if he was always an illusion. And from his ashes you were born. Proof that sometimes beauty can grow from horror. Maggie cooed her tiny fist, wrapping around my finger with surprising strength. Tomorrow would bring appeals, civil suits, the long process of healing. James's network was still being dismantled, his enablers facing their own justice. The survivor support group Sarah started was growing, becoming a movement. But tonight I held my granddaughter and let myself believe in redemption. Not for James. He was beyond saving had been since he pushed Timothy Morse off that jungle gym. But for the rest of us, the survivors, the fighters, the women who'd refused to be victims, we'd looked a monster in the face and won. And in this quiet nursery with snow falling softly outside and a baby's breath warming my neck, that felt like the greatest victory of all. 2 years have passed since James was sentenced to life in prison. 2 years of healing, rebuilding, and discovering who we are beyond the shadow of his crimes. Sarah and I live together now in a modest home in Wheat Ridge, far from the Denver society that once defined her world. We pooled our resources, her remaining trust fund and my teacher's pension, to buy a place with a big backyard for Maggie to play in and a basement we converted into offices for the foundation. The Margaret Chen Foundation for Survivor Advocacy has helped over 300 women escape abusive situations. Sarah runs it with the same steel she found during those terrifying months with James, while I handle the educational programs. We teach recognition prevention and recovery, all the things I wish I'd known. Maggie is 2.5 now, toddling around with her grandmother's stubbornness and her mother's grace. She has James's dark hair but Sarah's warm eyes, and every day I watch for signs of Marcus Patterson's poison in her veins. So far, there's only sweetness, though she does have a manipulative streak when it comes to bedtime stories. "One more, Nana," she pleads, holding up a chubby finger. "Please." I always cave. Sarah says I'm spoiling her, but after everything we've lost, a few extra stories seem like a small indulgence. Richard Harrison made a full recovery once the arsenic was flushed from his system. He sold his medical clinics and used the proceeds to fund domestic violence shelters across Colorado. He visits every Sunday a doting grandfather who brings too many toys and stays for dinner. "You saved my daughter," he tells me each time. "You saved us all." But I know the truth. Sarah saved herself. I just finally opened my eyes enough to help. The other survivors stay in touch. Laura Hensley's new tech company went public last year. Monica Valdez became a victims' rights attorney. Each woman who testified found their own path to reclaiming their power, and we celebrate every victory in our group chat that spans the country. Margaret Chen's parents return to Denver every year for the foundation gala. Mrs. Chen always requests the same thing, that I tell Maggie stories about her namesake, the brilliant law student who loved mystery novels and wanted to be a judge. We're creating a memory of Margaret that James can never taint. As for James himself, he tried to appeal, of course. Filed motion after motion from his federal cell, each one denied. Gregory Aldrich abandoned him after the trial, especially once the investigation revealed Aldrich had helped launder some of the stolen funds. He's serving 3 to 5 in minimum security, his legal career destroyed. James wrote me letters at first. Poisonous things full of blame and manipulation, trying to work his twisted magic through the prison mail system. I burned them unread after the first one, which blamed everything on Marcus's influence and begged his loving mother for forgiveness. There is no forgiveness for someone who chose to become a monster. The investigation revealed the full scope of his crimes. 23 victims over 20 years, starting with Timothy Morse. The insurance payouts alone totaled over $30 million. Some victims will never know about women who disappeared or whose deaths were never questioned. But his network crumbled. The corrupt psychiatrist who was going to commit Sarah lost his license. The doctors who provided the poisons faced criminal charges. The financial advisors who helped hide the money are serving their own sentences. Evil rarely works alone, but neither does justice. Detective Patricia Stone retired last year with full honors, but not before solving 12 cold cases connected to James's activities. She stops by sometimes for coffee and to play with Maggie, this tough cop who goes soft at toddler giggles. "You did good, Leann," she told me recently. "Not many would have had the strength to see the truth about their own child." But strength isn't what it felt like. It felt like dying, like every happy memory was being poisoned retroactively. I went through photo albums searching for signs I'd missed. There was James at 5 smiling at his birthday party. Was that emptiness in his eyes, or just the camera flashed James at 12 the day Carl died? Was that grief on his face or satisfaction? I'll never know. That's the torture of loving a sociopath. You question every moment, wonder what was real. Therapy helped. Dr. Brennan, a specialist in trauma from family violence, guided me through the maze of guilt and grief. "You loved who you thought he was," she explained. "That love was real, even if the person wasn't. You're mourning a phantom, and that's a unique kind of pain." Unique. That's one word for it. Others might include excruciating, suffocating, soul-destroying, but also eventually liberating. Because once I accepted that the son I loved was a fiction, I could stop trying to save him. I could focus on the family I'd chosen: Sarah, Maggie, Richard, the survivors who'd become sisters in survival. Last month, something extraordinary happened. A woman named Jennifer Liu contacted the foundation. She'd dated James briefly in college before Margaret. He'd seemed perfect at first, but something felt off. When he started pushing for joint bank accounts after only 2 months, she listened to her instincts and ran. "I always wondered if I was crazy for leaving," she said over coffee. "He seemed so wonderful. Everyone said I was lucky to have him, but something in his eyes..." She was the one who got away, the only one who saw through the mask before it was too late. "What made you trust your instincts?" Sarah asked. Jennifer smiled sadly. "My mother survived a con artist when I was young. She taught me that when someone seems too perfect, they're usually hiding something imperfect. James never showed vulnerability, never admitted fault, never seemed fully human. That scared me more than any threat could have." We added her story to our educational materials. The importance of trusting those quiet doubts, the red flags hidden in perfection. The foundation grows stronger each year. We have chapters in 5 states, now support groups in 12 cities. Sarah's become a sought-after speaker, her story resonating with women who thought wealth and status would protect them from abuse. I speak too, though it never gets easier. Standing before audiences of parents, teachers, social workers, I bear my greatest failure and deepest shame. I raised a killer. I tell them. Loved him. Sacrificed for him, enabled him through my blindness. But love shouldn't make us blind. The warning signs were there. The lack of empathy, the calculated charm, the way he viewed people as tools rather than humans. I ignored them because I couldn't believe my child could be evil. That denial nearly cost innocent women their lives. The speeches usually end with someone approaching me afterward, tears in their eyes, recognizing their own child or partner in my words. I give them Detective Stone's successor's card, the foundation's resources, and most importantly, permission to trust their instincts over their love. Today is Maggie's 3rd birthday. The house fills with laughter as children from her preschool chase bubbles through the backyard. Sarah managed the party planning with her usual efficiency, though she still checks exits reflexively and tenses when unknown men approach. "Nana, look." Maggie runs to me, her party dress already stained with chocolate cake. "I'm 3 whole years." I sweep her into my arms, this miracle child who almost wasn't born. 3 whole years of wonderful you. She beams, then squirms to get down, distracted by a friend with a new toy. So normal, so innocent, so unlike her father at this age. We've shown her photos of James. Sarah insisted on honesty from the start. But to Maggie, he's just the sad man who made bad choices, which is perhaps the kindest description anyone's given him. As the party winds down and parents collect their sugar-rushed children, I find myself in the kitchen with Sarah and Richard. We move with the easy synchronization of a family forged in crisis. "She's going to be okay," Richard says, watching Maggie through the window. "Whatever genetics she inherited, you two will guide her right." Nature versus nurture, Sarah muses. I research it obsessively. Most studies say sociopathy requires both genetic predisposition and environmental triggers. James had Marcus's influence. Maggie has us. "She has love," I correct. Real love. The kind that sees clearly and chooses to protect rather than enable. As evening falls and Maggie finally crashes from her birthday excitement, I sit on the porch swing Carl built 30 years ago. One of the few things I kept from our old life. The chains creak familiarly as I rock, thinking about the journey from that super fresh parking lot to here. I lost a son but gained a daughter. Lost my illusions but found my strength. Lost my past but discovered a future worth fighting for. Sarah joins me bringing tea and a blanket against the cool air. We sit in comfortable silence, two women bound by trauma and triumph, watching the stars appear over our small, safe corner of the world. "Do you ever regret it?" she asks quietly, turning him in. "No." The answer comes without hesitation. I regret not seeing the truth sooner. I regret the women who suffered because I was blind. But stopping him, never. "You're the strongest person I know, Leann." I squeeze her hand. "We're the strongest people we know. All of us who survived him, who found the courage to speak truth to charm. That's the real legacy. Not his crimes, but our resilience." A sound from inside. Maggie calling for water. Sarah goes to tend to her, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Somewhere in a federal prison, James Patterson Jr. sits in a cell designed to hold him until he dies. I don't hate him anymore. Hate requires emotional investment I refuse to give him. He's simply a cautionary tale now, a reminder that monsters can wear familiar faces and speak in voices we love. But here in this house, full of laughter and healing, 3 generations of women are writing a different story. One where love means protection, not possession. Where strength comes from facing hard truths, not maintaining comfortable lies. Where family is chosen by heart, not determined by blood. Tomorrow I'll wake to Maggie's giggles and Sarah's coffee brewing. We'll have breakfast at the table Richard built, plan foundation events, maybe visit the park. Ordinary moments that James can never poison because we bought them with our courage to see him clearly. That's the greatest revenge against a man who lived for control, a life fully lived beyond his reach. As I head inside to join my real family, I pause at the door for one last look at the stars. Somewhere up there, Carl and Margaret Chen and Timothy Morse and all of James's victims shine down, finally at peace. And here below, we live for all of them. Free, strong, together. The trap we set for James became our liberation. His destruction birthed our creation. Where he sowed pain, we harvest purpose. And that, perhaps, is the truest justice of all. Dear viewers, if you've stayed with Leann's story until the end, I want to ask you something. Have you ever ignored red flags because someone seemed too perfect? What made you finally see the truth? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else trust their instincts. If this story touched your heart or opened your eyes, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and strength. Share this with someone who needs to hear that love shouldn't blind us to the truth, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is see clearly. Thank you for joining me on this difficult journey. Remember, trust your instincts, believe survivors, and never let anyone make you doubt what your gut is telling you. Until next time, stay strong and stay aware.